Hi everyone, welcome to the Personal Finance Playbook. I'm your host, Coach Jack of Longhorn Financial. Today I'm really excited for my special guest in today's topic. It's something that is very near and dear to my own heart, and think about it especially because my own mother lives quite far away. Caring for older relatives is a difficult and very emotional decision, and it's tough to know all the different options that are available. And of course, you always have to consider the cost. To provide some insight and share her own story of how she had to deal with this, my special guest today is Sarah Coletti, Director of Sales and Marketing from the Blair House. Blair House is located in Tewksbury, Massachusetts, and is an assisted living and nursing home facility. So I'd like to welcome Sarah Coletti. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Jack.
You're very welcome. So Sarah, let's get right into it. So as I mentioned in our intro just a moment ago, I know you and I have talked about this before coming on set. You had a personal experience with this as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So can you share a little bit of that with us?
Sure. So I definitely have a personal connection to elder and senior care. My father specifically was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's in 2004. He was only 51 years old. So obviously this is a very unique circumstance and really different from most people dealing with a loved one that has Alzheimer's. Usually people are dealing with a loved one who's maybe in their 70s, 80s, or 90s who has Alzheimer's. So my father passed away 3 years ago at the age of 61. So it was a 10-year decline. And my mother and I obviously had to go through every experience imaginable when it comes to senior care. We had to hire home health aides, hire agencies. We had to work with MassHealth and spend down a lot of funds to be covered by MassHealth. Eventually, we had to deal with respite stays at nursing facilities, as well as placing my father in a nursing home toward the end of his decline, as well as involve hospice. So I did go through it on a very personal note. My grandfather also had Alzheimer's in his 90s, and he was placed in an assisted living community as well as a nursing home facility.
Wow, so I know you and I had talked about that before, and so it's, like you said, it's very unusual for someone so young, your father, to get Alzheimer's, but so not only is it what you do today, but you actually had to live it.
I did, and it's very emotional, and like you said in the beginning, it's something that, you know, we a lot of times don't want to think about, we don't want to talk about, and it's scary to talk to our parents about what do they want if they do get injured or they need more care, and what kind of finances do you have, and having that conversation to really plan for the future.
Okay, so let's talk about the different types of care, because I know that this is something that you do offer at Blair House. So, so let's start off by, could you just talk a little bit about the different levels of care that are available generally, and then we'll get into some details about each level.
Absolutely, sure. So there's a lot of misconception around different levels of care for seniors. And this is not just for younger people, this is also for the elderly, of, you know, what's out there for different types of care. So there's pretty much four, might be five, but there's independent living, which I can talk about a bit and what that means and what that looks like. We at Blair House do not offer independent living, but we do have many relationships with facilities that do. There's also adult day health, which is day programs for seniors where they can go during the day. Assisted living facilities, which provide personal care, but really if someone doesn't need that much skilled nursing care. And then there's nursing home care or skilled nursing facility care. So those are really the top four.
Okay, so you know, a lot of times when I speak to people, and I know that this is sometimes my own impression, that when people think about long-term care or, you know, caring as you get older, people immediately think of nursing home, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's sort of, you know, whether it's sort of a gut reaction, wherever they think of nursing home. But let's start with the first one you mentioned, independent living. So just take a moment, just briefly sort of explain to our viewers sort of what that actually means.
Sure, so independent living, there's a lot of different terms for independent living. You might have heard the term retirement community or senior living community or over 55 community. Another one is congregal living or congregal communities. And independent living is really geared towards seniors that have very, very minimal medical issues. They're active, they're healthy, they're over the age of 55, but are fully able to live on their own. In these communities, it's really about purchasing a home, kind of like a condo, like you would purchase a condo. And then with that will come social and recreational opportunities, as well as typically meals, but very limited personal care and medical care. So it's one of those things where in a transition with seniors, this can be great as a first step, when looking to sell your home, but be in an area that caters more towards seniors and quality of life and interaction with other seniors. But as far as personal care, medical care, if your loved one needs those services, you always have to remember that you will then need to pay extra for those services. These communities don't provide those. You then need to hire additional home health or pay extra for those types of services.
Okay. So I'm going to skip the next one that you mentioned a moment ago and go to assisted living. So,
sure.
So you're talking about independent living, very low level of services, for the lack of a better term. But the next one up is assisted living, right?
Yes.
Which is something that you do offer. So so tell our viewers a little bit sort of what that means.
Sure. So assisted living communities are just that. You're living independently, but there's assistance with personal care if needed. So assisted living communities, you have your own apartment if you live there. You're not sharing a room necessarily, you have your own apartment. Typically assisted living communities offer studios, 1 bedroom, some offer 2 bedrooms. Some also offer memory care services for those with Alzheimer's and dementia. But the attractive thing about assisted living is that you can move in and just have very minimal personal care or medical care concerns. When I talk about personal care, I'm talking about acts of daily living. So you might need a little assistance getting dressed or bathing or going to the bathroom or things along those lines, or just, getting up out of bed. Those are things of acts of daily living and personal care that you might need assistance of. But if you only need a little bit, you don't pay for it or you don't need to utilize it, but it's there as your needs progress. So if you are aging and you need more personal care, those services are available. They're also staffed 24 hours a day by CNAs. The meals are included, utilities are included. Some include laundry, some include cable, telephone, all of those things. So it's a really attractive way of making sure your loved one is safe, and that as you age, those services are available to you. Okay, good. That makes a lot of sense. So thank you for clarifying that. So of course, now let's get to sort of the highest level, which is what I think everyone's fear is, right? Sure.
Nursing home, right?
Sure.
Or nursing care. So share with our viewers a little bit about that.
Sure. So I think I just want to start by addressing, I think, the history of nursing homes and kind of that stigma of nursing homes being really scary. If we think about today and how much healthcare has changed over the last 30 years, so much has changed, and I'm sure the viewers watching this show know that. I mean, unbelievable strides have been made in equality and rights for patients as well as staff. In the 60s, in the 50s, in the 40s, in this previous generation, nursing homes did not have to follow these types of regulations, and they were pretty awful places. So people now that might be in their 70s, 80s, 90s, or above watching this show, they have a real right to be thinking that they're scary places, because that's what a lot of them were like back then.
It used to be, right.
But now, healthcare has come a long way. There's so many rights for patients, so many unbelievable regulations that need to be followed, that nursing homes are very safe places that provide activities and are really wonderful places, especially Blair House that I work for. So why somebody would need nursing care? Nursing homes are typically for people that are very frail and the very elderly, but there could be younger people that need rehab services or cannot live on their own but require 24-hour care from an RN, a registered nurse. So nursing home facilities provide that 24-hour care from registered certified nurses.
Okay, and that makes sense. So let me ask you this. So as we talked about, it's a really tough decision. It takes a huge toll on families emotionally as well as financially. In your experience, from what you've seen of families,
Sure.
what are some triggers that you've seen, or even in your case, where families then cause families to decide to take one of these routes, whether it's assisted versus still trying to do it at home? Have you noticed any kind of common theme or common trend or whatever where families say, okay, fine, we really do need to pursue something like
Sure.
this versus not?
Yes. I would say the number one reason when people start to consider these options is trauma. Some sort of unexpected trauma that happens, and they realize, well, we got to make a change. And unfortunately, that's really sad. Now, when I'm talking about a trauma, their loved one falls. Adult child of a loved one arrives at the home and they've realized that they haven't eaten in days. There's no food there. Things have gotten really dire for their loved one's care and concern, and that they can't live by themselves anymore. Sometimes there might be, a visit to the doctor and something happens. So it's typically a catastrophic event that then makes families start investigating a change. This is kind of sad because it forces people to make a decision relatively on the fly rather than, again, kind of taking a step back before a trauma happens and talking to your loved ones about, again, what the plan, what would they want to do. Now, most people want to stay home. They want to stay in their home, and that's great. And, I am a full advocate of staying home as long as possible, and people can do that with home care. There are numerous agencies out there, but some of that's covered by insurance and some of it is not. And at private pay for home care, it can be very expensive when you're also paying for a home, property tax, utilities, cable, food. So a lot of times when people do come to me or any facility, they'll literally sit down and do the math, and they're like, when you look at the money, it actually does make sense to move their loved one and know that they're safe and their personal needs are being met.
Right, and I know with my own father-in-law, my wife kind of went through this with her family when her father got injured and needed care. His wife had to spend time interviewing prospective home health aides or personal care assistants, I think they're called, or something along those lines, and having to find them. And I remember the amount of time that she had to spend to do it. It was not easy.
It's very hard. It's very hard. We went through that with my father. The agencies that we worked with for home care with my father were incredible. Like I cannot say enough about them. But just like you said, on the flip side of that, the management of these people and the care they provided and working with the agencies, it's almost can turn into a full-time job, just managing that communication and the care with the people coming in and out of your home.
Right. So let me ask you, so in your role, you speak with prospective families who are considering Blair House for their elderly relatives.
Yes.
What are some common questions that families ask that you get, that everybody always asks these questions? What are some of those?
The most common question that everyone asks is about the food.
About the food.
The food. Everybody wants to know about the food. People are very concerned that their loved ones are going to eat, of course, and that's fully valid, but they want to make sure the meals are nutritious, they're healthy, and they're suiting their needs. And also, a lot of seniors have dietary needs. It's becoming more and more common, even with children, as we know, with allergies, gluten issues, all those things. But the elderly, some need ground food, some need it chopped up. Maybe they need things pureed. So there's always a lot of questions about that. Diabetes issues, all salt issues, all those sorts of things. So that's the most common. I would say other common questions is definitely activities and recreation. Loved ones are always concerned that anyone considering moving in is going to be engaged and have quality of life. As at least speaking about Blair House, we have in our assisted living community activities director, and most communities do, as well as 2 other activities staff. So we have activities all day, every day, and outings every week. Our nursing facility, we also have 3 dedicated activities director. Same thing, activities all day, every day, including outings. Not all are the same, so that's always a question that you want to ask about nursing homes. And that can really help just, create more quality of life and obviously keep the brain active.
Right. So that makes sense to me. It's funny that you mentioned food, just because how important that is, and is it nutritious? Is any chopped? Does it taste good?
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
I think sometimes people, I know for me personally, think about sort of the stereotypical hospital food, right? Hospital food, as people say, that stuff will kill you.
Yeah, yeah. And I would say lastly too is extra costs. People are always asking, well, what are the extra costs? And that's a very, very valid question. And anybody watching today, if they are starting to look at facilities, whether it be, again, home care, nursing facility or an assisted living community, you really want to ask about extra costs and go into very nitty-gritty detail about what those might look like. An example of what I'm talking about could be laundry, for instance. Most assisted living communities include linens, and there is no cost for linen service. And when I say linens, I mean your blankets, sheets, and towels. But personal laundry typically is a cost. And I would say the average resident at least my assisted living community is spending $40 to $60 a month on personal laundry, which is not a lot of money, but each community is very different, obviously, and that's just an example. So you really want to go into depth about any additional costs or things that are extra.
Okay, that's a great tip. So let's take the opposite tack, right?
Sure.
So those are some of the common questions. In your role, as you meet with prospective families, what are some questions that maybe you think that families should ask, but maybe don't, or don't commonly ask?
Sure, definitely. So definitely, like I said, extra costs is a big one. That's one that typically families don't think to ask, which is kind of interesting. And we at Blair House really want to be very transparent about everything and be very honest with families about everything from the beginning. And that's a big goal for us, and it's something we pride ourselves on. So that's one I always go over, is any extra costs that could be incurred, so families can prepare. It makes things easier for everyone. Definitely reviewing the lease. All assisted livings, for instance, they follow Mass state tenant law here in Massachusetts. So residents of assisted living communities have the same rights as a tenant anywhere in Massachusetts, depending on what kind of lease structure they have. So I definitely want to recommend that you look at that lease, you read your lease, you know your rights, and obviously come back and have a lawyer review it and make sure you ask any questions that you might have. Another thing is definitely continuum of care, and what happens if something happens to my loved one. So speaking again of home care, assisted living, etc., having a plan of what would happen if my loved one falls, if their behavior changes, if they need more personal care, how would that communication work? In our communities, we have directors, nurses, assisted resident care directors that would communicate back to the families if something changed, or if there was a fall and they needed to go to the hospital. What happens during an emergency really is what I'm getting at. For us specifically, we're very lucky because we're directly attached to a skilled nursing facility. So what's great about that is, again, if one of these things happens, your loved one can just go right next door, get the care they need, and then come home to the assisted living. It's right down the hall. You don't have to leave fully. It's a really big factor. So I would say those are the three top questions to ask providers.
Okay, great. And so I want to jump back a little bit. So you mentioned activities and having activity directors. So one level of care that you mentioned earlier that I didn't ask about is the adult day health.
Sure.
So we kind of talked about the residential now, but adult day health is not residential. So talk to our viewers a little bit about that.
Sure. And just I know we talked about my father in the beginning, but I do just want to say that, at least for my family personally, adult day health was our saving grace. My family, I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't had adult day health in our lives. Again, because my father was so much younger, my mother was still working, I was working, and it wasn't safe for my father to be home alone anymore. So it was finding an adult day health program where he could go every day, have fun, be engaged, have activities, listen to music, be entertained, make friends. It was a godsend, and he felt like he had a sense of purpose rather than just being home alone all day. So that really sums up kind of what adult day health programs are. Adult day health programs provide care for seniors at a facility during the day. Some have programming Monday through Friday, some have programming 7 days a week, some have programming 6 days a week. Many provide transportation back and forth, and a lot of times if a senior is watching and they have MassHealth, it would be covered. It's covered by MassHealth, including transportation. That's a really big deal. A lot of people don't realize that it could be free for them. And even private pay, it's very affordable if it's a private pay. All adult day health programs, again, have engagement throughout the day. You want to really research them and tour them and make sure the program is right for your loved one. Some focus on Alzheimer's and dementia care, some focus on people with developmental disabilities, some focus on all. Another tip to look for adult day health is if they're skilled nurse staffed or not. If they are skilled nurse staffed, then personal care can be provided at that facility. So your loved one could actually get a bath there or a shower there or be changed there. And if your loved one's living at home, and if they're a bigger person and their spouse is living with them and they can't help them in the shower, it's too difficult for them, this can be a godsend because they can get cleaned, bathed, all weather at adult day health as well.
Wow, okay.
And again, most have live music. They have exercise programs, cooking clubs, gardening clubs, outings every week. They can just be amazing. And if there's a senior watching that, if their loved one went to work every day, which most people did, then you're getting up, you're going out. You're having something to do, and you're not used to sitting home all day, right? So this is also something that can be very meaningful to people. You're getting out, you're doing something every day, and then you're coming home.
And knowing that your parent or elderly relative is taken care of, so you can still go to work, like you said.
Exactly.
And know that they have activities, they're going to be set, and they're just not sitting home all day. That must take a ton of stress away.
Exactly, and that they're being engaged. And it isn't safe for loved ones to be home if there's a risk of a fall, if they're not able to feed themselves, if it means family members keep leaving work and having to go check on them and make sure they're okay during the day. There's a lot of correlation between issues at work, and employers are actually spending quite a lot of money on, incorporating services like this and education into their offices to make sure people know these services are available, because it leads to a lot of absenteeism at work. So, not just, for spouses, for loved ones, aunts, uncles, children, grandchildren, it can just really relieve the weight to the extended family.
So you mentioned a little bit about costs and a little bit about MassHealth. So to the extent that you're aware, which I know that you're not always aware, but the fear for all this is, of course, cost.
Sure.
Right? In your experience and what you've seen, generally, how do families cover the costs? What have you seen of the families you've dealt with? Sure.
So, it's not cheap. Jack, we know this. And it can be really tough. The families that I've encountered since starting at Blair House, some have planned very well, and some haven't. Some haven't planned at all. Some have had discussions with their loved ones about what they want, and their children or adult children or family members are very aware of the financial situation at hand. And that makes such a huge difference in, having care for your loved ones. So there's a number of ways that people typically pay for all of these types of care. So just focusing on independent living. Independent living as a first one, again, it's more like you're purchasing another house there's additional fees for the recreation and social. Typically people like this, these are more expensive communities. There's a sale of a house, they use their savings. Some have Social Security benefit, a vet benefit. Some have purchased long-term care insurance. Those are few and far between, but some have purchased long-term care insurance. But typically it's from those sources. That is the same for assisted living, as well as nursing home care if it's private pay. So all of those, I would say, savings, sale of a house, family members sometimes chip in, again, long-term care insurance, veterans benefits, and spousal benefits, and long-term care insurance.
Much easier if you plan ahead for this.
Definitely, and that's why they need to call you.
Right. So you mentioned a little bit about MassHealth, Medicaid MassHealth, and how things like transportation for adult day health was covered. So Blair House is a Medicaid I think certified facility, I believe, right? But not all facilities are.
No, they aren't, and it's really important if your loved one is reaching the point where they need nursing home care, or it's being recommended that they have to be in a skilled nursing facility. At private pay, the rates are very high. Typically, private pay in Massachusetts for a skilled nursing facility can range anywhere between $300 a day up to $700 a day.
Wow, right.
You think about that, that's per day. That's anywhere between $8,000 and $15,000 a month that you're paying at private pay for nursing home care. Obviously, there's Medicare, which covers some of it. If it's a rehab situation, there may be insurance that cover partial. It's all dependent on what you have. But it's always very important to look at nursing homes that are Medicaid MassHealth certified, because again, if your loved one is at one and then your money is spent down and you're ready to be covered under the MassHealth program and you apply for MassHealth, you'd have to move your loved one again to another facility that was certified. So mass.gov is a great resource for this, to find a facility that is Medicare and Medicaid, Medicare, and MassHealth certified.
Okay.
We also have a vet contract, which is pretty exciting about our nursing home as well.
Okay. So we just we have about a minute left. So one final question for you. So having been through this yourself, what's a common misconception, and maybe if you can share one tip to the viewers who are watching that as they're thinking about this, maybe either for themselves or their loved ones.
I would say the biggest word of advice or tip I would say would be calling a financial advisor, and that's one of the reasons why I'm here with you today, and talking to them about how to talk to your loved ones about making a plan as soon as possible to pay for care. And finding out what your parents want or what your loved ones would like to do, and really doing the math about what would make the most sense and also provide the best quality of life. Again, where your loved one isn't sitting home by themselves with no engagement. All those things I would say start now, start early, have an open relationship and with your loved one about and conversation about money, and having a financial advisor to do that, because they can really facilitate that conversation and make it a lot less uncomfortable if you've never talked to your loved one about money before. And I think you had asked me one more question.
Yeah, I think that, and I think that's a great tip. It's something that I have to do with my own mother. So I want to thank my special guest today, Sarah Coletti, Director of Sales and Marketing from the Blair House. When I first met Sarah, it was for business networking, but my mother, who lives far away, she really gave me a lot of things to think about. Just like I hope that you, the viewer, were able to take away a few tips and found this information informative, because I know I certainly did. Thanks so much for joining us today, and stay tuned for our next episode when we take another topic from the Personal Financial Playbook. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jack.